So it looks like we have almost everyone here, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you're calling in from. So my name is Suzanne Amari, and I am the Deputy Director for IDEAL. And we welcome everyone to this first day of the stakeholder consultation focused on resilience, food security activity, requests for applications, design, and process. We ask that you do turn on your video if internet connection allows, knowing that we're in this virtual space. People may be working from home, have other distractions, but it's nice to be able to see each other's faces, even though we can't be in the same physical room together. We encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat by telling us your name, your organization, and where you're calling in from today, if you haven't done so. And we'd also like for you to change your name on Zoom to your preferred name, just in case your name is currently an email address or your children have been using your Zoom account, and also include your organization next to your name in parentheses, so we know who all is coming. So I'm going to go over now how to do this if you're unfamiliar with this feature. If you have any technical issues during the next 2 days, so please just send a chat to anyone with IDEAL in their name or who has the IDEAL background screen that you can see that I have right now, and we'll do our best to assist you. So we'd like everyone to know that we are providing French interpretation for the stakeholder consultation. If you'd like to follow the event in French, you will need to click on the small globe at the bottom of your Zoom screen and then select French. Once you've selected French, you can choose to mute the original audio, or you can hear it in the background at a lower volume. For English speakers, please select English as your interpretation language, and I would encourage you not to mute the original audio. Believe it or not, there won't be an echo. Don't worry about that. I have the English interpretation going right now, and I'm not hearing myself. Again, if you have any technical issues, please send a chat to anyone with IDEAL in their name or who has the IDEAL background. And we'll do our best to assist you. So now what we've asked is that everyone change your name on Zoom to your preferred name and include your organization next to your name in parentheses. So to change your name in Zoom, there are a couple different ways to do this. So first is to click on participants, the participants button at the bottom of your Zoom window, hover next to your name, and you will see more in blue pop up. Click on that and click rename. Then you can change the text of your name. So you see and click OK. So I have just changed my name. The other option is to hover onto your picture. If you are in gallery view or side-by-side view, and you can, when you hover on that, there's a 3 dots. Click on that, and then then you can see the rename option. Again, technical issues, please reach out to anyone with IDEAL in their background or who has IDEAL in their name. For everyone's information, we are going to be recording all of our plenary sessions over the next 2 days. Breakout room discussions, however, will not be recorded. So I'll pause in case there's any technical questions, issues. But again, feel free to chat anyone with IDEAL, or you can send a chat to everyone if you're having any issues. But otherwise, I'll hand it over to Ideal's Activity Director, Karen Romano.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And thank you again for joining us today. You are most welcome. We're so glad to have you with us. So for those of you who are less familiar with Ideal or who are just hearing about Ideal through this consultation, I'd like to first provide a brief introduction. The Ideal activity is funded by USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance and works to support the US government's goal of improving food and nutrition security among the world's most vulnerable households and communities. A very important part of our work is providing these sorts of structured opportunities for implementing partners and BHA to engage with each other on critical issues that affect food security programming and identify solutions together. You can learn more about how Ideal supports the food security implementing community by visiting the link on the screen or clicking on the link in the chat box. As many of you already know, this stakeholder consultation will bring together nearly 40 participants over 2 days from both implementing partners and BHA to discuss the RFSA solicitation process and requests for application content in order to improve the effectiveness of these and of RFSA programming for reducing food insecurity. So, what distinguishes a stakeholder consultation from any other meeting? So a stakeholder consultation is intended to be a highly participatory, interactive exchange between BHA and IPs that provide an opportunity for BHA and IPs, or implementing partners, to have a peer-to-peer dialogue and do some mutual problem solving. It's also intended to be a venue for partners and BHA representatives to articulate or express the challenges they're facing in a safe learning space and hear each other, hear challenges faced by others with an open mind. And it's an opportunity for myth busting, clarifying misconceptions that partners might have about BHA or that BHA might have about partners, and vice versa. So, and we also would like for this to be a space where BHA and implementing staff can work together in crafting or refining new and improved approaches to resilience and emergency food security activities. So with that spirit in mind, with that intent in mind, we heartily welcome you to the first stakeholder consultation facilitated by Ideal, and everyone's first virtual stakeholder consultation as well. So you're learning with us as we learn to do this virtually. So we thank you for your patience and for going along with it. And we very much look forward to 2 days of creatively and collaboratively working together to improve the quality of RFSA programming. So with those few comments, I'm going to hand over to Dan Houston, who serves as the Strategic Planning and Activity Design Team Leader at BHA, for a few remarks. So over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Karen. Really appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. As Karen said, my name is Dan Houston, and I'm the Strategic Planning and Activity Design Team Leader in the Office of Technical Program Quality with the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance. I cannot underscore how excited and grateful that BHA is to have this opportunity to discuss the experience with and opportunities to improve our RFSA activity design process with all of you, our partners. This effort is just one part of our commitment to learning and constantly evaluating and improving our process to promote and encourage high quality RFSA activity designs. BHA knows that you put incredible amounts of resources, financial, human, maybe even emotional, into these applications and programs. Partners really are the heart of our programming, and you offer incredible value in understanding how we can improve the process to make it more efficient and effective to produce high quality programming. I want to assure you that we will consider all of your ideas and contributions to this process. We highly encourage and implore you to be candid and offer your ideas and opinions openly and freely. And we implore you to explore any ideas that are proposed thoroughly to reflect both the benefits, but also the drawbacks or potential negative implications to developing high quality activity designs. I want to emphasize that the purpose of this engagement is to get your feedback on the RFSA activity design process, as Karen explained earlier, but to also really to brainstorm and explore solutions. As all of you know, BHA has many different considerations in the development of our processes, and we may not be able to accept or endorse your proposed ideas. However, now that I've implored your energy and ideas, there are a couple things that I need you to be mindful of and to respect. BHA is ongoing RFSA procurement processes for Haiti and Mozambique. We ask that you not provide questions about how to respond to those specific RFA procurements, and we have instructed all of our BHA staff not to provide any ideas or information regarding those procurement processes, as well as any internal workings regarding past processes. So we thank you for your consideration related to that and your interest, but we want to protect the integrity of our procurement process and to ensure that we have a level playing field for all of those that might be applying. So with that, I will hope that we have a very productive and engaging event. Thank you again for all of your insights, your efforts, your ideas, and really the considerations and the value that you bring to our process. Again, I can't underscore how important it is for us to hear and have this opportunity to have this dialogue, engage with you. And I really appreciate from the bottom of my heart, as well as BHA's heart, all of your efforts. So with that, I'll turn it over to back to Ideal.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Karen. I'm going to now hand it over to Maya Person, who is Ideal's advisor for knowledge management and communications. And she's going to give an overview of the technology that we're going to be using over the next couple of days.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hi, everyone. So good to see so many here. Just a little about the tech we're going to use today. So we'll be using Miro, a platform called Miro. But no worries, if you're new to this, you won't need to go into the Miro platform and navigate anything yourselves. We will be doing this through screen share. So you will only need to follow this in your Zoom room. There's a trick that I wanted to teach you though, in case you didn't know it already. For me anyway, it can be a little bit hard to see sometimes the screen from Miro. It can be tiny, the letters. There's a way that you can actually zoom in your Zoom screen. So looking at your Zoom window and hovering to the top of the window, you'll see in bright green, you're viewing Kim J. Ideal's screen. And then next to that, there's something called View Option. So if you click View Options, there's a menu option underneath that says Zoom Ratio, Fit to Window. That's the automatic setting that will fit the screen perfectly into your window, meaning that it can be kind of tiny sometimes. So from there, you can choose the percentage that you prefer to see the screen in. And if you, for example, test out 150%, now, of course, you won't see the whole slide. Your cursor will turn into a little hand, and you can click, drag, and move the screen around so that you are able to see all the text on that slide. So please test that out and make sure you're comfortable, and then you can just use this throughout our session. If you want to go back, you just hover to the top again, Zoom Ratio, and Fit to Window, and then you're back into the standard setting. So I also wanted to say that, of course, this will be a highly participatory consultation. So there will be several ways you can participate. You can raise your hand either on camera or using the Zoom raise hand function. That can be found. It's a little bit different depending on which Zoom version you have. So either it's in participants, you click participants, and at the bottom of that list, you have little symbols. One of them is a blue hand that you can raise. We will be monitoring the participant list to see if any of you have a hand raised. For others, it's under reactions. So at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you have something called reactions. So some people have the hand raised in there. You can use whatever fits you best, whatever you want. So also, of course, chat box. Use the chat box. We'll be monitoring the chat box throughout. So either individually to one of us or to the whole group. Feel free to use to use that function as well. In the breakout rooms, we'll always have someone from Ideal there, both a facilitator and a note taker, who will be sharing screen so you can follow along on Miro. I think that's all I had for tech. And of course, if you have any questions, you see all the Ideal staff with a bright background, just reach out to us and we'll help you. All right, so we're a lot of people in the room. It would take too long to go through everyone and introduce ourselves, but we still want to do a little bit of an icebreaker activity so we can get to know each other a little bit. You will be zoomed into a breakout room with a couple other people, and your task is to find something that the group has in common. Now, this could be anything. Maybe you all lived in Nairobi at some point in your lives. Maybe you're all Manchester United fans, who knows? We'll send you into these breakout rooms for 5 minutes and we'll hear what you found when you come back. So see you in a bit. Well, thank you so much for participating in that. And I will now hand it over to Bianca Flockstra, Strategic Learning and Capacity Development Advisor for Ideal, to take us forward in the program.
Thank you, Maya. And it's great to finally see all of you here today after many communications these last couple of months that you've had from me. As you can see on the slide, the ultimate objective of this stakeholder consultation is to increase the quality of programming of BHA-funded RFSAs to reduce food insecurity. And so this consultation gives partners the opportunity to really help shape and provide input into the RFSA solicitation process and content in order to really improve the clarity of the request for applications. It's also a chance to provide input to improve the quality of RFSA designs and also to lower barriers to allow for a wider range of applicants in the process. So as mentioned before, this will be a highly participatory, solutions-oriented event. It will include both small group discussions and plenary discussions. And to reiterate what both Karen and Dan said, this is really an opportunity to share our thoughts openly and freely. We really want to create space for ideas that range from anywhere from easy fixes to really paradigm shifts. And as Dan mentioned, not every recommendation will be actionable, and even those recommendations that are actionable may not be completed in the time frame that we would all want, but we still want to hear all of your ideas put forward openly and freely. So I want to remind everyone that though the stakeholder consultation is about the request for applications process at large, BHA will not answer any questions about the currently open RFAs of Mozambique and Haiti. So let's move on to some ground rules to help make this consultation successful. We would love for everybody to be present and engage thoughtfully in the conversation. So we encourage honesty. We want to hear everyone's voice in this space. We want to listen respectfully as people share. We do have a limited amount of time together and we want to make the most of it. And so we want as many people to participate as possible. We want to share the air. So again, make room for all voices to be heard. So just really notice if your voice is dominating the space, and if so, step back, can allow other voices to join. And at the same time, you might notice if you need to take up a bit more space and allow your voice to be heard a bit more. We also want to say that no personal or organizational identifying information should be shared after the event. We do encourage you to use examples from your personal experiences or from your organization, but Ideal will not record this information in our note taking. And we do ask that everyone else attending also do not share other people's personal or organizational experiences outside the event. And then for virtual considerations, as a reminder, please do put yourself on mute when you're not speaking. And then if you can as we've been saying, turn your camera on if bandwidth allows. That really helps with the engagement aspect and feeling like we're all in the room together. And to really be engaged. And you, as Maya has mentioned in previous, there's several ways that you can be engaged in the stakeholder consultation. Utilizing the chat function is a great option if you have technical difficulties. And we always encourage you to reach out to any of us if you are having difficulties so we can make sure all barriers for participation are taken care of. Now about the agenda. So to give you an overview of the next 2 days, we have the agenda on the screen. Today is really, we're going through the opening right now. And in just a minute, Suzanne will be taking us through the major themes that emerged from the qualitative outreach that were also included in the pre-read that each of you received. We'll have a short break, and then we will go into instructions and breakout room activity. And the breakout room activity will really be focusing on a certain number of those themes that came out for today. The rest will be covered tomorrow. So after we go through a select few themes in our breakout room activity with the end goal of coming up with recommendations and prioritizing those recommendations, we'll have a gallery walk where everybody will be able to see what all breakout rooms discussed and chose for their recommendations for that particular theme. And then we'll go over next steps. Tomorrow will be much of the same sort of format. We'll be also doing another breakout room activity that will cover the rest of the themes that we do not get to today. Do another gallery walk, and then at the end of tomorrow will sort of be the capstone of the event where we take all of the recommendations that came together and we prioritize those recommendations for next steps moving forward. So now I'm going to hand it over to Suzanne, who will now go over the pre-consultation process, how we got here, and then the major themes that came out of this qualitative outreach. So over to you, Suzanne.
Thanks, Bianca. As many of you know, the content for this stakeholder consultation was informed by implementing partners' inputs, many of your inputs, during a qualitative outreach process, the interviews that we held prior to the event. So to design the event itself, gather the themes for discussion, Ideal interviewed 25 staff from 13 organizations, and as well as one independent consultant. Positions of these staff ranged from senior directors of food security to business development directors, specialists, even to chiefs of party for currently funded RFSAs. So our interview questions were designed with BHA to get partner input on their experiences of the RFA design and the solicitation process. We explored design elements of the RFAs, submission requirements, and the solicitation process, acknowledging that the design and the process have varied over the last 5 years, and each RFA can vary depending on context. So even among those released in the same year, they may not be the same. Ideal analyzed the notes from these interviews, identified common themes across them, and then sent a summary of that analysis to you all last week. I encourage you to have that summary analysis handy throughout these 2 days if you want to refer back to some more detail. Although, as you'll see when we go into breakouts, we have summarized the feedback and the recommendations there, so not required. So after review, from the pre-consultation interviews, 9 major themes emerged. Theory of change, multi-phased approach, RFA release timing, contextual information, key personnel, prescriptiveness and level of detail, complexity versus focus, and barriers for new or non-historic partners. Proposal development burden was also a theme, and we highlighted this in the summary that we sent as a pre-read, but we're not going to have a specific breakout session on this theme because we really found that it was embedded in many of the other themes. Today, we're going to focus on 3 themes. So first, the first theme is theory of change. So partners really recognize the importance of the theory of change for developing a good program, starting with the problems and mapping out pathways to get solutions. But partners agreed that developing a theory of change really required a considerable amount of technical skill and resources. And especially partners who have less experience with theory of change development tended to struggle the first few times that they go through the process. Partners also stated that developing a theory of change can be really complex. And some said that it may not be worth the time it takes to build out during the proposal stage versus the value that it has during implementation. Another note was that the developing a theory of change is challenging for field or technical staff who may be pressed for time, who may face language barriers, or who just have different ways of approaching logic than a theory of change logical flow. The next theme the other theme that is going to be explored today is complexity versus focus. So when faced with uncertainty of BHA design preference, partners tended to gravitate to what some called a kitchen sink approach. So putting in a wide variety range of interventions and out of fear that they might be penalized for not including a specific topic or element. Some noted that what is being asked in the RFA and what's actually feasible in a 5-year program is not necessarily consistent. That some partners expressed concerns that they don't have the same interpretation as BHA in the same definitions and terminology as BHA in terms of programming principles and cross-cutting elements especially. Some recent RFAs had more than a dozen programming principles, and so the number of that number of programming principles and elements made it difficult for partners to focus in their design. The third topic theme that we're going to discuss more in depth in the breakouts today is prescriptiveness and level of detail. All of the partners really noted that they appreciate a high level of detail in the instructions and definitions for RFAs, that it helps with that demystifying what is expected. About half of partners saw that the current level of prescriptiveness in the RFAs was effective, with the other half either wanting less prescriptiveness or more prescriptiveness. Partners tended to associate more prescriptiveness as effective, found that it helped in eliminating guesswork, and especially related to kind of the expectations from BHA. Those who appreciated less prescriptive noted that less prescriptive approaches encourage partners to take risk and to be more innovative. There are commonalities across these themes, these three themes that are likely to come up in your conversations in your breakout rooms, which is understandable, and that is fine. We can move forward with those. Just as Bianca noted, really the ultimate objective of the stakeholder consultation is to increase the quality of programming of BHA-funded RFSAs to reduce food security. So much of the feedback during the interviews focused on the complexity, the barriers, the burdens of the proposal process. And so you'll see that in the feedback and you'll see that in the summary. And those issues are important, but over the next 2 days, we really want to ground our conversations in the goal of improved programming. So as you're discussing specific themes, be thinking about how changes at the RFA and the proposal design phase could address some of those common issues. Things that maybe have come up from Impel's midterm evaluation analysis, things like intervention prioritization, quality of program implementation, sustainability of outcomes. I'm going to pause there and see if there are any comments or questions. Feel free to enter your comments into the chat or to raise your hand. I don't. Okay. Yes, Jackie.
Hi, sorry, just a question. So you're saying the main objective is quality. How does BHA look at it sounds like you also have an objective of increasing the number of partners that are able to apply, or that reducing that barrier to entry. Is that barrier to entry, and I'm sorry, I'm using that concept, right? Is that also important to BHA? Do you see that as a means to achieving more quality? Or how do you square those two, what seem like two objectives up? Against each other, if that makes sense to you?
Maybe Deanne, if you want to address that. I think you did in your opening remarks, but did we lose Dan?
I'm not sure if Dan might have had to step away from his computer, so
okay.
I'll address it as best I can, and I welcome others from USA to help me out. But yeah, we see those as complementary to each other. We are interested in lowering the barriers for entry and allowing non-traditional partners to be able to more easily apply to the RFSAs, and we see that more applicants could help increase the quality of programming in the long run. So we see those as complementary initiatives.
Thank you, Hillary. I don't see any questions in the chat or anyone else with their hands up. But again, throughout the day, anytime there's a question that comes up, really appreciate you speaking out, send a chat, and we're going to have these open conversation in the breakout rooms too. All right, so now I'm going to introduce our parking lot. We're going to be using this throughout the event. So we are in this virtual space. We do not have an easel where people can place sticky notes, but we are going to still have this parking lot for thoughts or ideas that might come up that aren't directly related to the conversation that we're having at that time. But we still want to document them in some way. It could possibly be topics for future stakeholder consultations. So you can add items to the parking lot by indicating in the chat what you would like to go on the slide. An ideal person will then add your comment to the parking lot. Also, a facilitator in breakout or in a plenary discussion may note that a comment or discussion is not pertinent, is not directly related to the conversation that we're having, and suggest that it be moved to the parking lot. And then our note takers will make that note and put those into that parking lot space. We'll review the parking lot periodically and address any questions that come up that we can answer immediately. And before we move on, we're gonna take a break. We're gonna take a quick 10-minute break.
Suzanne,
yes, yeah.
Just a quick change. We're going to actually do, we'll go over the breakout room activity instructions first, and then we'll take a break. So
okay,
let's hand it over to Maya to talk about that.
Okay.
Thanks. Yes, so when you come back from break, we're going to have a 10-minute break. And when you come back, you'll be placed in a breakout room with a theme. So each breakout room will have a theme. And there will be an ideal facilitator to guide the discussion forward, and a note taker to capture the discussion. So the themes, as a reminder for today, the themes are theory of change, complexity versus focus, prescriptiveness, and level of detail. you'll be in a breakout room with one of those themes. At first, to begin with, you'll be given time individually to read through the feedback and recommendations listed for that specific theme. And the feedback and recommendations were, of course, pulled from the qualitative outreach and what you all shared with us. You'll then discuss as a group any missing recommendations and add those on Post-it notes to the board. And then as a group, you'll prioritize 1 to 3 recommendations. So your facilitator will go through these instructions again as soon as you go into the breakout rooms. You'll also have another break in that whole period. We have listened carefully to all the feedback we've been receiving as ideal to our events, that breaks are very important, especially now when we're in this virtual world. So we'll definitely offer you plenty of breaks throughout this session. Yes, so right, I also wanted to mention that unfortunately Zoom doesn't have the interpretation function in breakout rooms, but we have tried to place those that we know had indicated that they prefer French with a French interpreter in their breakout room. So for that, just let the facilitator know, and the interpreter will do consecutive interpretation for anyone who needs it in the breakout rooms. If you are in a room that doesn't have an interpreter and you would like that, just tell your facilitator or note taker and we can just move you around. Yeah. And lastly, yeah, just a reminder again that these recommendations that we come up with, these prioritized recommendations, and the recommendations that were all discussed during this activity, not all of them, of course, will be taken on by BHA. We also want to remind people that BHA and IDEAL are not committing to the recommendations that come out from this activity. However, we, IDEAL and BHA do commit to consider and review all the recommendations that come out of the activity. So those, that was it from me. I think now let's take a 10-minute break and see you back here exactly at the hour. For me, it's 9 a.m. Eastern time, and I know that's different for all of you, but 10 minutes on the clock on the hour. Let's see you then.
So we're gonna take this gallery walk around the breakout room boards, and the representative chosen from your group will share what you discussed regarding your theme and what recommendations you prioritized. When your group is not presenting, we ask you to use the chat to add comments or questions. You can also raise your hand. I'll ask you to unmute yourself. We ask that you do not unmute yourself while others are presenting. I would say let's give about 5 minutes for the report out, and then 5 minutes for questions and discussion for each group. So 10 minutes per group. So thank you, everyone. Let's go to group 1.
I guess that's me. I'm reporting out for group 1. All right, so a lot of our conversation, we talked about what it might look like for a condensed theory of change. And we sort of decided on a couple of main elements that might need to be included, and that was maybe more at the higher level of the TOC, so like goal, purpose, high level outcomes. You can see it on the screen there. We felt like you could maybe eliminate certain things, that could be listed elsewhere. They wouldn't necessarily need to be shown graphically, so that could take out a lot of the time that is spent kind of formatting it at the end and making it look pretty, and like all the little cute icons and things. At least this is for the proposal stage, right? So we talked a lot about how the TOC is used sort of for 2 purposes, and at the proposal stage, it's a very different purpose than what it would be used for a programmatic stage. So we felt like that there were 2 kind of distinct pieces, in that it needed to be sort of treated as such, because it does need to be completely revamped anyway when you get into the R&I stage anyway. So we felt like one thing that we were missing was that we really need the people who review the proposal, the USAID reviewers, to really identify what elements of the TOC that they need to make a proposal evaluation and decision. And then we can kind of identify which pieces can be eliminated for the proposal stage. And so I think a nice way of summarizing it was sort of is this bottom level, which I can't entirely see, balancing the level of effort for applicants with the utility of the TOC reviewers is kind of how we would summarize that. And then finally, we kind of also talked about a bit about co-creation, and I think we kind of decided to put that in the parking lot in terms of this also, a lot of some of what could appear in the TOC could be informed by a co-creation process, but we know that some are doing co-creation, I think, and some are not. And so I think we know that's sort of an evolution, and that could be something that can be discussed later. I think we put that one in the parking lot. So I think that captures most of our conversation. Apologies to my group if I missed something.
Great. Thank you, Liz. Do we have any questions or comments? I know we have another group that went through theory of change as well. And we'll go through your recommendations, prioritize recommendations there. But anyone else who are in other groups have any reactions, questions, comments?
Thank you. I do have a question, but probably I will save it until, to listen to the next group, which also looked at TOC, and then probably we can have that conversation. Thank you.
Great. Great. Thanks, Arif. Anyone else? Immediate reaction now? Otherwise, we can go to the next group and then maybe have that broader TOC discussion. All right, let's go to group 2 then. Group 2, who is reporting out for you?
Hi, that's me. Unsurprisingly, our conversation was fairly similar since we were starting from the same source materials, but we did have a lot around this, not just capacity strengthening, but what are the challenges in TOC development and the burden that puts on a proposal team. There the language issues, there's the need to understand the context in the specific geography. There's familiarity with the TOC development process and the fact that not all of the ideal materials are available in French or other languages. And then, we talked about how that leads to more centralization within a proposal team because the people who have experience developing TOCs have to do it. And so it's a long process of validation and revision and revalidation and revision. And what a lot of that, so that was definitely one of our recommendations, is that we need more of these materials, that if possible, that BHA make these official tools and guidance. We understand that there are some issues with that when materials are developed by a partner, but to the extent possible to do that. Then there are a lot of cards here, and one of them at least is half off the screen there, but we kind of grouped together everything around the timing for the required elements of the TOC. So for example, the card that you're not seeing there, is that if it is a multi-stage process and you have a abbreviated initial application, not even to require a TOC there, and that relates to the card below it about that initial stage really focusing in on community consultation and co-creation with stakeholders to show that the applicant has really understood the issues and the needs, and then the TOC could follow in the successive stages of proposal development. Yeah, that goes along again with the management, the dual use as a management tool issue. We also felt that the card about providing high-level goal purposes and sub-purposes is very important because it gets to the challenge of prioritization and depth versus breadth. So we felt that BHA and perhaps the mission should push themselves to define as much as possible what they think they're looking for. And in particular, I just want to highlight, since it's not here, but it's in the notes, that this also applies to other USAID investments in the country, that it really is incumbent on the mission to say what they want, because those projects might not even exist yet, and no one knows really how to layer and combine with them. A fairly easy win, we need to assign an actual point value to the TOC in the review criteria. It's lumped together with a few other elements, and that makes it hard to justify the huge investment of time to develop a TOC when we're not sure how it's being scored and how much the TOC is being considered, for example, in assessing the activity design as justification for it. And then that last card at the bottom about including BHA staff, we weren't sure exactly what it is responding to, what the problem is that it's responding to, but we felt that that could have something to do with many of the other TOC challenges that we identified. So if you have the TOC experts working with the technical design teams from the very beginning, they can help them to better align the requirements at the different stages and what is being asked for. I think that's what I can do in a few minutes. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Just for other groups, let's focus in on the prioritized recommendations. And I know that this group lumped a few recommendations together under a broader prioritization, item, but where our goal to at the end of day 2 is to we're going to have a set of prioritized recommendations from each breakout room, and then we need to even further narrow in on what what are the things that we really want to move forward, knowing that ideal BHA, whomever the person taking forward those recommendations might be, can't tackle everything that comes up today. So thank you, Liz. Thank you, Dan. Let's open it up to a conversation about theory of change. So Arif, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. These are great, feedback and recommendation. I do have few questions probably, and so that we better understand and we move forward in a way that is helpful to all. So whether, an application present a theory of change or don't, you have a theory of change, right? That's the way you are designing the activity or the intervention. And I understand that it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And the question is, how do we minimize that time and minimize the burden on the applicant so that it still serves the purpose, yet doesn't require a lot of human power or LOE? Couple of ideas. One is that the higher level TOC is essentially conceptual framework, which doesn't change based on the context, which is same across the countries. How do you achieve nutritional outcome? If you look at higher level objectives, they're very much same across the board. If you look at how do you achieve, WASH outcomes, if you look at the higher level, they're the same. So the question is, will that help? Will that bring the applicant, USAID, and then afterwards, when the project is going to be awarded, the implementation team bring to the same understanding that how this activity is designed, how this proposed intervention is going to achieve or contribute to the higher level outcome. So one idea that we discussed with Ideal, that can we together as a community led by Ideal, but bring people from implementing community and USAID, the technical people, develop higher level theory of change, what you are proposing here, but develop a higher level theory of change, which will not change. That will be the same in Niger and DRC and Bangladesh. So the higher level theory of change really doesn't add that much value to a reviewer or to an implementer, who is probably hired after the fact. So, but we can probably bring, and that's what we were discussing with Ideal, that can we bring a group of people facilitated by Ideal and then develop those higher level theory of change and then make it available to everybody, so that the implementing community can then take it, like if you are developing a WASH theory of change, pull it out and then flesh it out at the lower level, which changes depending on the context. I stop there, because I'm just trying to share this idea, because we do acknowledge that we need to minimize the burden, on the applicant. But what is the more, doable way and also serve the purpose? That's probably the question. How do we get to that place? Over.
Thanks, Arif. Any initial reactions to Arif's suggestion?
Yeah, Arif, I was just, if we do that, if you have a standard theory of change across the board, high level, because I think the complexity we're trying to get at is that country specific goals, high level objectives. So how, if you have it consistent across programs, I still don't know how it would, address this specific issue where we want to know what the priorities are in that program in that country.
Yeah, thank you. So that's what I was saying, that, so now an applicant has to develop a theory of change from the goal to the intervention level, right? Which can easily become too complex because these are complex multi-sectoral programs. But if, let's say that a nutritional higher level theory of change, with infant and child feeding practices, those are probably same, but what practices could be different, but we know that infant and child feeding practices are important to achieve the nutritional outcome, one of the key elements, right? So that level of higher level objective doesn't vary too much between countries. But then an applicant can take it out and then flesh out the bottom level, from intervention to that level. That could be very much country context. That's the thinking. Again, I'm not saying that that's the way we are moving forward. That's one of the ideas that we have been discussing and sharing with you to get your feedback, that whether that will reduce the burden, but at the same time, also address some of the challenges that we all are facing now.
Thanks, Arif. I see Mara has her hand up and then Kelly.
So Arif, I have a couple of additional comments based on what you've said. First of all, there is a higher level framework which we've been using, which is the Food for Peace strategy, which I guess at some point is going to change into the BHA strategy, and it's a strategic framework. So in general, we assume that there will be certain elements of that that will fall fall under our programs. And basically, those are similar, those are seen everywhere, etc. However, there have been a number of RFAs that focus on one of those as opposed to others. And there may not be a strong component of livelihoods, or there may not be a strong component of nutrition as part of the RFA, or it may be really focused around resilience building, or inclusive governance structures, etc. And for those things, I think it's important that it's clear to us what BHA is actually looking for in this, in the design, and that is provided early. Okay, so we have an idea of what we are in fact designing for. Okay, so, you know, and given the fact that we need to come up with a context analysis, do we research every aspect of the context or do we focus on some others? Okay. As well, I just want to mention that for these kind of more focused RFAs, we still have to measure the goal level outcomes for child nutritional status. Generally, we're talking about stunting, as well as the livelihood status, ones such as depth of poverty, or I forget the other one, but you know, all of this is you know, to what extent are those indicators relevant when the focus of a program is kind of, you know, more precise? You know, when do you measure those indicators? And you know, there are people who've said, well, I'm afraid not to include certain aspects. Part of it is driven by our M&E specialists who are saying, oh, but you're going to have to measure stunting at the end of this program, or you're going to have to measure depth of poverty at the end of this program. So once again, maybe a little more consistency between the actual TOC and what is in the M&E guidance as well.
Thanks, Mara. And we are getting at time, but I want to give time for the people who have your hands raised. So please just be brief so we can get to the recommendations from the other rooms. And I know that there will be some things that overlap in these discussions, so we can continue to have them through the different rooms. Kelly, please.
Yeah. Just to add, I think Mara touched on a couple of things I was going to say as well, but you know, at the I think for each country specific RFA, a higher level TOC at the goal and purpose level is useful, but adjusted to the context. So maybe I don't see it as one that kind of it fits all, but yeah, there are changes in such that where that could be adjusted for a particular country. And then developing the higher level outcomes is something the applicants would do. And then add the external outcomes, the assumptions, and constraints at what we present, you know, in the application itself. Of course, we have to think through the pathways further down, but I think that logic is captured in the technical narrative, and that logic is captured also maybe at the TOC narrative summary. And there are places where we can explain that logic, but maybe not have to show and present an entire large complex graphic at the initial application phase itself would be helpful. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Kelly. And thank you, everyone who's been putting your thoughts and ideas into the chat. I encourage you also to use the chat as well as the raise hand function. And we are capturing the notes in the chat and the notes in the conversation as well. So good, rich discussion, but let's move to group 3, who spoke about complexity versus focus.
Hi, all, this is Jeremy. Meredith, were you jumping in first, or should I just start presenting?
Go for it. Take it away, Jeremy.
All right. So we had we looked at several of the recommendations that were in the documentation that was sent around earlier this week or last week. I think where we landed, and there's some overlap here, of course, with I'm sure with some of the other discussions you all had. One of this is where the star is clarity in the technical section in terms of what's required versus what's in gray area. I think that, and the recommendation here, and then there's a balance between being very prescriptive in the RFA with still allowing for sufficient innovation. But I think it's tied to what Dan may have mentioned for TOC, is tying the things that are really important in terms of the programming principles and specific technical areas to the evaluation criteria in ways that's been done for like gender and social inclusion. That way, it's very clear. It's very clear how important a TOC is in the technical application and how it's going to be applied in the evaluation criteria. I think that one element kind of sums up several of the different recommendations, different boxes here. Another one that we had talked about as a group is making sure that when there are programming principles, and I think in particular kind of newer programming principles, that those are well defined. I think that was in 5 minutes, but I think that sums up the recommendations from our group.
Thank you, Jeremy. And why don't we do similar to what we did before, since there were 2 groups that spoke on complexity versus focus. Let's hear from the other group, and then we'll open it up to the wider discussion. So group 4.
Thanks, Suzanne. That's us. Okay, so complexity versus focus. I think everyone in this group loves these diffs and the complexity of them. So we want to maintain some level of complexity. We like that it ensures coordination across these different technical areas, and it reflects that hunger is complex. These are kind of some of the things that came up in our group. So we like that. Our priority feedback was we had, the principles and cross-cutting elements are numerous and sometimes duplicative within them. So we recommended consolidating the program principles with cross-cutting themes to ensure ensuring consistent labeling across them. And then our second was the same that we just discussed, but I'm just going to reiterate. We were thinking high-level country-specific purpose and outcomes, the high-level purpose and outcomes and the priorities of USAID in country. Not only for the complexity, but also because that's where the insiders get the leg up. So a newcomer we don't know those things, what USAID is looking for in the country. So it's important that we understand those priorities at that level, but then leave the rest of the design to the implementers. And that's where our, that provides some structure and parameters, which are healthy for creative and independent thinking. So those were kind of the themes. And then Penny was going to explain the focus, our focus. Penny.
Yes, hi. Just saying that we had a conversation about how difficult it can be to achieve the balance between complexity and focus, given how complex hunger is, and given all the incentives throughout the entire RFA process, with the cross-cutting themes, with the program principles, with the creation of a theory of change, which is looking at so many different factors. There can be so many different incentives to tackle all the things you keep coming back to thematically. And we had a conversation Adam was laying it out that, what you do is you figure out what is the most constraining factors. Yes, many of these things might be factors, but what's the most constraining factors? How can we make our theory of change concentrate on that? And then having all your activities going out from that, even though you acknowledge all the different elements of hunger. And we were just thinking, some real practical guidance on how we can achieve focus while still acknowledging the complexity of the issue, because I think we all get ourselves into a bind, and what we end up doing is just bringing in a bit more and bringing in a bit more and bringing in a bit more, and then suddenly we have 82 activities.
Thank you both. All right, so let's open it up to comments, questions. Again, chat is open, or you can raise your hand. Or your groups just did. Everyone agrees. Yes, these are the ones. Liz, please.
Sure, I just put this in the chat, but I do very much agree on sort of the need to have really clear definitions about what is sort of the principles, what are cross-cutting issues, and kind of how do you, there's a lot of duplication there, and there's a lot of overlap. And so if that can really be thought through, and I think some of those would, what I've seen in some of the RFAs, like they're almost like word for word, right? It's like they take the cross-cutting issues, or they take the principles and then they plop them right in, and then they add their own, right? And so I think those need a more critical eye in the RFA design process, and saying like, okay, we're not going to add this other thing. These issues are already addressed in this, so let's just like refine this and sort of smooth that over so that it's not the same exact sort of, it's like, it's not exactly the same, but it's like almost the same with like a different twist. And so you're like, how am I supposed to respond to this in a very clear way in terms of writing this proposal? Like, how do I respond to these different points that are just slightly different? So, I think we try to really be very responsive to whatever gets presented in the RFA, but when there's things that are like duplicative or like almost the same but not quite, or like they're called one thing in one part of the proposal and then called something else in another part of the proposal, that's when it really is challenging for us to make sure that we're getting everything within the right sort of page limits and things like that. So
thanks, Liz. Now we have Dan in the chat there. Anyone else? Again, feel free to use the chat, but we can go ahead and move to group 5. Who is reporting out for group 5?
Yeah, Tierno is going to help with reporting out.
Okay.
Give him a second there.
Oh, yes. Thanks, Karen. So there was a lot of discussion in our group about prescriptiveness and high-level prescriptiveness in the RFAs, and we came up with 3 top priority recommendations. Among those, then, is for BHA USAID to actually provide purpose or high-level TOC outcomes while leaving the room to partners to provide lower branches. We think that can bring a bit more innovation and sometimes flexibility to really contextualize what the activities can be. And the number 2 is, again, high-level prescriptiveness is seen as sometimes limitation, especially for partners to bring innovation. And sometimes even within the country, you can see differences from specific contexts. So it means then if we are to just align with what is prescribed, then we don't see that. The recommendation for that is that to provide a clear explanation on what elements are required actually on the RFA and which elements allow innovation and flexibility. I think that came up with group 3, I believe, as well. And the number 3 priority or recommendation is to provide additional communication pathways that pre-RFA with or post-draft RFA that are inclusive of potential new partners and allow for dialogue. Because sometimes those new partners, when they come in, they don't have a lot of details or maybe not lessons learned or are not used to the donor. So it means they need some time for more additional kind of dialogue and information from USAID that can help actually align on what they think can be the best way to propose within the RFAs. Uba?
Thank you, Tierno. And we'll open this up to discussion questions now. I think we can see across the 3 themes a lot of synergy, a lot of common recommendations, which is actually great for us to narrow down things.
Did we lose William?
Joan, I can hear you. All right. Joan, do you want to expand upon your message in the chat?
Oh, sure. Just that one of the reasons number 4 was raised, I think, if I remember, was that some of the partners were saying that they really they want more opportunity to be able to share their contextual expertise. While folks were saying they want there to be a high level TOC outcomes and all of this already predetermined, and they want a certain level of prescriptiveness, they also want the opportunity to be able to share their contextual knowledge, which is often very, very great about what the needs are, what the problem statement is, what purposes should be there or sub-purposes should be there in the application. So just something pre-RFA, if there can be an opportunity for dialogue somehow.
Any other comments or questions about any of the themes that we've discussed today? All right. Well, we are moving along at great time. So we'll likely be able to give some more time back to you. So I'm going to go ahead, continue if there's thoughts that you have to put in, to put those in the chat. But I'm going to hand over to Bianca now to talk about kind of our next steps.
Thanks, Suzanne, and thank you to everyone for your participation today. In terms of next steps, we have the agenda up there for tomorrow, which I went over earlier in the day, but we'll be starting again promptly at 8:00 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we look forward to seeing you back in this space at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll be going over the first thing tomorrow morning. We'll be going over anything that came up in the parking lot during today. So we'll address that first thing in the morning during our recap. And then Suzanne will continue to talk about the major themes that we did not address today, but we'll be addressing tomorrow. So there will be 5 new themes that we're going to be working on in the breakout rooms tomorrow. And there won't be any repetitive breakout rooms like we had today. So it'll be 5 different themes tomorrow that we'll be covering. And then we'll do the same thing for a gallery walk as we just did just now to report out and have some discussion around that. And then our final thing that we will do tomorrow is take all of the prioritized recommendations from both days of breakout rooms and do an overall prioritization activity with everybody in plenary, prioritizing what might be the things we could most focus on moving forward from the stakeholder consultation. So before you leave, we'd like to...
Sorry, Bianca, Mara has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Mara.
Yeah, so this session today is ending at 11 o'clock as opposed to 12 o'clock EST or EDT, sorry. And I'm just wondering why that is, because some of us schedule our lives around these meetings. Is tomorrow similarly going to end early or what?
I don't think we anticipated that we would be ending this early. Actually, we had anticipated a little bit more time for the discussions and things like that. We just got ahead of schedule, and so we thought that it might be nice for you all actually to get some time back in your day to be able to do your other deliverables. But we'll certainly be holding a debrief later today and see if anything can be adjusted for tomorrow's schedule. We'll also be sending out an evaluation, and if you have any feedback for us on that as far as how tomorrow will go, we can definitely incorporate that in. So answer, we don't know for sure about tomorrow, but we did, put timeframes on what we thought we would be keeping within.
And Bianca, maybe if I can just add a word, it's kind of hard to calibrate how much people want to talk about issues. So in your feedback, just let us know how we did with that. Like if we should have maybe allowed more time in the small groups, or, just give us a sense of where you would like to have more space, in the conversation tomorrow, so we don't, so we use your time effectively. So, thank you.
Great. So before we leave, we'd like for you to fill out a quick Zoom poll, which will appear on your screen, just to get a pulse check on how you're feeling right now at the end of day one for this stakeholder consultation, and then how you're feeling about tomorrow's stakeholder consultation. So I'll just give you a minute real quick to just fill that out, and we'll post the results for everybody to see how we're all doing after today. All right. We got almost everybody who's voted. Just have a couple people left. All right, I think we can just go ahead and publish the results of the poll. So it looks like a good majority of you, 74%, have been satisfied with today's stakeholder consultation. A couple are tired. I can relate with that. It's been a very busy but productive morning. A couple feel determined. And then for tomorrow, it's pretty spread across the board. So some are hopeful, some are excited, some are curious. Thank you for sharing. This is really it's good for us to see where you all are at with how you're feeling. So we appreciate that. And then we're now going to give you a few minutes to fill out our survey. As I mentioned, this we'll be putting the link to it in the chat box. If you can't access it for any reason, just let us know. But we'd love to hear your feedback, more qualitative feedback on how today went. Again, as I mentioned, we're going to be debriefing as a team, and we'd love to adjust and adapt to your needs tomorrow to make the best use of your time, make sure that we're meeting your needs. So we'll just play some music again and give you some time now to complete that evaluation.